I hate slow books. So this week I'm going to be reading 4 iconic classics, from the easier ones you might have read before, to dabbling in some slightly more difficult Jane Austen, and ending with attempting to read what's widely known as the hardest classic book to read of all time, which I'm really scared about, but I'm hoping that in reading each of these books, it's going to help me to heal my short attention span for books. And to ease me into all of this, I'm starting with what I've heard is one of the more easy classics to read. It's Frankenstein by Mary Shelley. Obviously, I've heard so much about the Frankenstein story before, but it's actually so much different than I expected it to be. The biggest thing being that Frankenstein isn't even the green creature that we always imagine him to be. Frankenstein is the one who creates him. Also, I'm glad I started with this one because the writing is pretty easy to read. There are some slow moments, but I'm getting through them. I'm getting pretty close to the ending now. The story has surprised me a lot. It's way more thrilling than I expected. There's a lot of twists and turns. There's suspense and mystery, and I'm assuming that's a big reason why this is considered a more easy classic to read, so I have not struggled too much with this one, which is a great sign. So I have finished Frankenstein. I really like this one. I think I'm gonna rate it a 4 or a 4.5 stars. That was so nice because I know as the books go on, they're gonna get much harder, especially the last one. The more I think about it, the more I'm like, how on earth am I going to read that book? But that's a later problem. For now, I'm gonna start my next book. Although it's kind of short, the language is supposedly a bit more difficult to get through than Frankenstein. So to help me read this next book and all my future books, I've compiled a list of different ways to help increase your reading comprehension, some of which are very unusual, but at this point I'm kind of willing to do anything to help ensure I'm going to understand these books. Some of them are like reading and walking at the same time, because apparently movement can help you remember things better, or taking notes or annotating. I have a bunch of different stuff on my list. The hardest one is probably to take a test after every single chapter you read to make sure you're understanding things. I might save that one for the last book because I feel like it's gonna be the hardest, but like the most necessary for that book. But for now, I'm going to be reading Of Mice and Men by John Steinbeck while also taking a walk. So it's time for me to walk and read. I'm honestly not quite sure how this is gonna help me to focus more on reading, but when I looked it up, it says that this should help. So I've brought Of Mice and Men with me, and I'm gonna start this book in the gym. Hopefully it'll help me focus and won't actually end up distracting me even more. So I got to the gym, found a treadmill, and started walking. As far as comprehension goes, I honestly feel like the walking may have been a little bit distracting from the book, but the good thing is that I was loving this book right off the bat. The fact that I love the book so much helped me to focus on it a lot more. I'm exactly halfway through Of Mice and Men now. I'm 50 pages in. The book is only 100 pages long. I'm loving this book so far. If you've watched my videos, you would know I've read a little bit of John Steinbeck before, and his books are some of the only classics I've read before that I really love and are not super slow to me, so I did have a lot of confidence going into this book. Basically, it's just about these two friends. They're both very different in personality. One is seen as being very like slow or not super intelligent, and the other one is a little bit older, and he kind of like watches over the younger one, and they have a very funny, very interesting relationship, but I also love them so much. I'm really excited to keep reading this book because I did hear that it has kind of a sad ending. I'll be honest, I was really loving Of Mice and Men. Like I said, I've read a few John Steinbecks before, and I always noticed all the biblical ties to his books. There was so much from the book of Proverbs that I saw in this book, and so many lessons you get from Proverbs I saw in this book as well. I didn't sit down and talk too much about this book because by the time it got close to the end, it started getting really sad. Even though it was only 100 pages long, I loved every bit of it. So I have finished Frankenstein and Of Mice and Men. We've got 2 classics down, and they were both pretty successful, I think. Now it's time for me to up the level a little bit and try something a bit harder. Jane Austen is obviously one of like the biggest classic writers out there, and although a lot of people love them, I've heard that they're very hard to get through. I've heard they're a bit slow, and I think the language is a little bit harder, but I've always wanted to read a Jane Austen book, so I'm going to do it today. And the book I will be trying out is Emma, and the little tactic I'm going to use to help me focus more on this book is going to be that I'm going to write and take notes as I'm reading this entire book, in hopes that writing things down helps me to remember them a little bit better. So it's time to start reading. I've read a little bit of this book now. I'm like still less than 50 pages in. This is definitely a big jump from my last 2 books, which makes me even more nervous about the last book that I'm going to be reading after this. Obviously, I can read it and I can understand in general what's going on, but I keep finding myself like reading over a paragraph, getting to the ending of it, and realize I don't know what I just read, and then I have to go back and read it over again. Like, I don't want to just read and get in general what the story's about. Like, I really want to understand this book and everything in it, but I do think that taking notes has been a really big help. So far, I've mostly just been writing down people's names and who people are like related to and who's married to who. There's a lot of different characters in this book, and so I'm just trying to keep up with everyone and what's going on. But for now it's been okay, and I do think it's a good story too. I really like the main character, Emma. It is a few days later, and I am now halfway through the book of Emma. I've definitely been moving way slower through this book than either of the other two before this. The good thing though is that I'm not like disinterested in this story. There's a lot that I do really like about it, and I'm very excited to see what's going to happen. I think my favorite part about the book so far is just Emma as a character. She's such an interesting person. Basically, she's not really interested in finding a husband or whatever, but she loves matchmaking for other people. And she has this like very practical, very logical, kind of dry personality that's honestly kind of funny to me. We're halfway through the book, and I feel like I've only just figured out who the love interest is going to be for Emma. It's just, again, a slower book. So far, the entire thing has basically just been like long conversations in like parlors or in a little garden somewhere, or like visiting different people's houses and talking about other people. And so it is kind of what I expected, and because of that, I'm moving very slowly. I've also been taking plenty of notes. I wrote like a couple different charts, and this has actually been helping a lot. I think this helped way more than walking while reading of Mice and Men. So I'm very happy I decided to do that. And today I have a lot of time to read, so I'm hoping I can make some good progress. It is so interesting to me how different romance books are now to where they were back in the day. This is like so complex. There's so much to this story. So many different characters with their own storylines and like several different plot points of different things going on. Like just a very complex story, which is like polar opposite to what romance books tend to be today. No offense. I just feel like a lot of times they're very one-dimensional. Or maybe just the ones I'm reading are. They tend to be so simplistic. The majority of the plot is just the one relationship, and that's pretty much all there is to it. This one is just like so different. I think that's one of the biggest things I've been noticing while reading this book, is just how different it is to most books of its type. So I've been reading a lot today. I'll be honest, I think I've only actually gone through a little over 100 pages, but that's a lot when it comes to a book like this for me. And I am nearing the end of the book. I'm getting really close. Maybe this is just because I read so much today, but I will say I'm getting a little bit tired of this book. Not that I don't like the story, but like I said earlier, it's very repetitive in just like one really long conversation after another really long conversation, and every single time they're sitting in a parlor and then like going and visiting someone else's house, sitting in their parlor and having a long conversation, and then going to someone else's house and doing the same thing. I love, like I said, Emma as a person, and her trying to figure out her feelings is kind of funny to me. She's just so different from everyone else in the story, it seems like, and the relationship is a little bit unexpected but also very sweet. So I'm gonna finish this either later tonight or tomorrow, and then it's gonna be time for me to start the really hard book, what is supposedly known as one of the hardest books to read ever. So get ready for that. I'm a little scared. I feel like I've made a lot of progress in this video so far. Over the span of a few weeks, I have completed 3 really amazing classic books that I ended up really loving. I really enjoyed Frankenstein. I loved Of Mice and Men, and although there were some really slow parts in Emma, I ended up really enjoying it as well. I also think that using these tactics for helping my reading comprehension has helped a lot, especially the most recent one I did, taking notes on the book of Emma. And you'd think after all of this, I could just say this video is over and I've accomplished my goal of overcoming my fear of slow books, but it's not over yet, because I have one more book that I plan to read that I'm honestly kind of regretting at this point, but I guess I have no choice now, which is War and Peace. This is how thick this book is. It's like over 1,000 pages. The more that I look at this book, the more I'm thinking there's no way I'm gonna finish this by the end of this video, so sorry to disappoint. But I'm definitely going to at least try some of it, and I'm gonna be using my last and probably most difficult way to help me stay focused on this book, which is to take a test at the end of my reading to see how much I was able to comprehend. And if I don't pass it, I'm gonna make myself read more until I do. So let's start reading. It's taking me so long just to read like one page. I'm like 30 pages into the book. I can definitely see how a lot of people would think this is the hardest book to read. It is really hard to get through. It feels like every other sentence I'm having to go back and reread the sentence again. Because I did go slowly and because I did focus, I do feel like I understand what these first 30 pages are about. So it's time to take a quiz. I found just some random quiz that I pulled up. I think AI made it, to be honest. It's only 10 questions, so I think I want to at least get like 8 or 9 out of 10 correctly. So it's time to take the quiz. A huge thing that I really wanted to get out of this video was just the ability to like branch out in my reading genre a little bit. To not believe that I'm just automatically gonna get in a reading slump if I try a slow book. And I'd say I picked some really great books out to help me do that. This is honestly really making me want to read more classics in the future. So let me know if you have any good classic recommendations. And I feel like now I can confidently say that I no longer hate slow books and that they can actually be really good sometimes. Okay, so I got 9 out of 10 questions correct. And I'm gonna call that a success.